Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Bhatvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitavastu ma vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnebhi Shrunuyama Devaah Bhadram Pashyema Kshabhiryajatraah Sthirairangaistuštuvagum sastanubhi Veshema Devahitan Yadayuh Swasti na Indro Vriddhashravah Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedah Swasti nastarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So in the last 3 classes, we had been looking into the importance and meaning of the word Upanishad. And through this example that I had given you, which is that there was these people who had mistakenly come to believe that there was a loss of their son, and they had no reason to disbelieve it. They were fully committed to, not committed, but they were fully cognizant of the inevitability of this very sad event in their life. And all they could do was to mitigate it in any fashion. So we had given this example that if you have a loss of a loved one, then all you can hope for is to get some remnants of their body or their possessions, and you keep it as much as you can, and you give proper burial or cremation to the person. That's all you can hope for. So your scope of some relief is very limited. That's what I'm saying. It's just very limited relief. At best you can hope that, and similarly what happens sometimes is, you've seen this, that if there is a crime against some loved one where somebody was kidnapped and killed, then that one is gone. But if you can find the killer, you get some relief. The reason these examples are important is because if we examine the nature of the word Upanishad in our life, this becomes relevant. And how it becomes relevant is the following. So when we look at the full meaning of the word Upanishad, the relevance will become clearer. Okay, so why don't we wait until we really examine the real meaning of the word Upanishad? So we had already looked at the two prefixes which define the word Upanishad, and those prefixes are Upa and Ni. So we had already gone through that. Upa means very near, and Ni means very definite, without any doubts. We had given this explanation that the nature of the knowledge about anything in the world is that you can never completely understand it. You can never have the last word. Never. Not possible. That is the very nature of Maya. Even though we think we are going to, we think we know everything about it, but there is always some factor which will leave it as X factor that is yet to be determined later. You can complete 99% of it, that 1% will be unknown. If 1% is unknown, that means basically the equation is not yet solved. So this is the nature of anatma, the knowledge of not me. But when it comes to atma, this gets completely reversed. And it gets reversed because the atma is not made up of parts. It is one singular, this is what is called Kaivalyam. Kevalasya bhavam Kaivalyam. We'll go into that. It's a singular, unchanging entity. And either you don't know it, or if you know it, you must know it completely. There's no hanging 1% to it. This was the meaning of the word Ni. Ni means Nishchaya. Means Nishchayatmika in Sanskritam. Nishchayatmika means that it is fully ascertained. Purnam, complete. So we had already looked at those two prefixes. Now today we will look at the real meaning. So prefixes are what? Prefixes are modifiers. Like, for example, you can say, this was good. So the goodness is the reality of what you are saying. It's not bad, it's good. Like you taste something new. It was very interesting. Last night, my wife and I, we're very, so buttermilk has become for most Indians, buttermilk is a staple part of the diet. And so we always buy the buttermilk. You can make it your own through the yogurt. We also have yogurt every day. But buttermilk, and especially my wife, is very fond of it. At each meal, at the end of that, she gets buttermilk. And I don't drink it every time, but most of the time I also drink it. So we used to get buttermilk from this one shop, Trader Joe's. And it was not a full buttermilk, but 1% buttermilk. And we have been using it for a long time. Recently, they changed their formula. It doesn't taste the same. So we said, let's look at some alternatives. So yesterday, my wife actually went to a couple of places, Safeway, to look at some alternative buttermilks that we could now taste to see which one we would now adopt as our new staple diet, staple end of the meal. So yesterday we were doing taste testing. She was asking my opinion, so I put it in two different cups, and I would drink one, and then drink the other one and compare. So my conclusion was both are good. So goodness is the essence. But you can say one was very good and one was not so good. So very and not so are the prefixes. But the essence of goodness is in the word good. If it was bad, we would have said, no, this is not good. So similarly, the word Upanishad, pardon me, the upa and ni are the prefixes. But the essence of the word Upanishad is in the verb dhatu, which says sad. Sad. And through sandhi rules, it becomes shad. Instead of sad, it becomes shad. But the essence of that is sad. So this is what we will examine today. What is the nature of the essence of the word Upanishad? So, it is said that the word sad conveys three things to you. And this is an important thing for us to really grasp. And in grasping the essence of this, the example that we had given about this family that had lost their son becomes relevant. The three meanings of, all three are the meanings of the word sad. So it's not alternative meanings. It's not as though you can either take this, and if you don't like it, you can go to this. If you don't like that, go to the third one. No, it's not like that. It by itself covers three aspects of the truth. That's the meaning of the three different elements of the word sad. What are they? One is called Visharanam. And the English translation of the word Visharanam is loosening. It loosens, L-O-O-S-E-N-I-N-G, loosening. So we'll explain that. This, I think, happens to be the most important aspect of the word sad, loosens. The second one is called Gati. Gati means taking you there. Taking you, Gati. Taking you has two aspects. One is the process of getting there, and the second one is reaching the goal. Both of them. So one is going, and the other one is the final stage of going. Is captured by the word Gati, which is the second meaning. The third aspect of the word Sad is Avasadhanam. Avasadhanam means complete cessation, annihilation, complete absence of something. It's called Avasadhanam. So those are the three aspects of the word Sad. Visharanam, Gati, and Avasadhanam. Okay? Having said that, now let's go into each one of those. First one is Visharanam, loosening. Oh, this is a very, very significant aspect of this word, Shad, of the Upanishad. So, also, We can go back to the example now and look at it in a very exemplary fashion. It's not a complete example, but it's pretty good. It's very relevant. So imagine the state of this couple who had lost their son because of the news that they saw on the radio, that they heard on the radio, and also a telephone call from the railway department, or perhaps when they went to the railway department, and then a devastation that our son, who was on that section of the train that got overturned, these 3 railroad cars, bogies, and 200 people died. And our son, we know that he was a first class ticket holder, and he died. So there was a lot of sorrow and so on. And now, for the next few hours, 12, 15, 16, of course, they could not sleep at all during the night. And so they were both crying and tossing and turning, but coming to grips with this loss. But they had accepted the loss. In other words, they could not be grieving unless they had accepted the loss. They had come to grips with it. And it was a very definite loss. They might have talked about a couple of things. They said, yes, there was. We also heard. And some of their friends might have said, hey, there was a train accident. Wasn't your son? He says, yes. Our friend also knew about the train accident. We also found out. And we talked to the railway department. It's done with. So this is a firm knowledge that our son is dead. Firm knowledge. Then the next morning, late morning, once there everybody has gathered for paying their condolences. This is something very peculiar amongst Indians in particular, and many other people as well, that as soon as there is a very great loss, a lot of people come to grieve together. And they stay for days. And the whole idea is that it helps to help the person mourn. So you don't have suppressed mourning. You get it all out. You cry and you discuss and you said, what if this had not happened? This is Ishvara's wish. All those things happen. So they were in the middle of doing that when there was a knock on the door. A knock on the door with some sweets. Flowers and sweets. You don't bring sweets and flowers unless there is something good. By a stranger that you've never seen before. And when the conversation took place, which said, I know you think your son is dead, but he is not. And I know that because he and I both were hurt, but we survived. You look at these bandages on my face, and this is because I also got hurt. But luckily we were thrown into a mud, and there was some cushioning, and I did not. Some of the other people died, but I didn't, and your son also didn't die. So now with this news, it is such an unlikely thing to have happened that you cannot just say, oh, okay, all right, thank you so much, wonderful, very happy. There is a period where both the firm idea that the son is dead and the new idea that the son is not dead are vying for attention. Because you are saying, should I believe this person or not? So there is a crack in the old belief, there is a certain crack. Old belief is not a, what's it called? The open and shut case. It's not an open and shut case anymore because there is a crack. And that crack is not definitive, but it is a crack. This is the meaning of the word Visharanam. And now let us look at how does it happen in our life. Okay? Because that's what really, as I had promised to you, that our study of the Kaivalya Upanishad should not be taken as academic. It should be taken as something that it applies to you personally. If you fail to see that, then I am not successful as the teacher of this class. My objectives are that you should be able to see this applying to you in your life. That's an objective. I hope we get there. So now let's look at this Visharanam, this crack in our life. What happens? So just look at this. And so, by the way, if you had, I think I had suggested to you that you go through this introduction section, which is from page 1 to 24 pages. It might take you a little while, but do go through that and perhaps go through it a couple of times so that it becomes very clear to you. And so Swamiji does just a very good job. I have a lot of respect for Swami Vedanta. I've known him so well. He is a very, very down-to-earth, clear, honest and truthful person. I'm just giving you my opinion of Swami Dayanandji. I'm sorry, Swami Vedanta. Because I was very fortunate actually that when the first time he came to this country, I was the secretary of Arshavidya's Peetham, and Swami Dayanandaji asked me, gave me the honor of introducing Swami Viditatmananda. And I had not known him very much. So I had to gather up some information about him and so on, but I did. I knew a little bit about him. One of the very senior students of Swami Dayanandji, who I have a lot of respect for, Carol Whitfield. Her name is Radha. And so I had met Radha, and we have known each other for a long, long time. She was the classmate of Swami Viditatmananda. And I remember when Radha used to talk about the teaching, even before I really knew Swami Dayanandji, she used to talk about Swami Dayananda and how the students were there. And I was telling Radha that I really greatly admire your understanding and I would like to follow your path and become a student. And I didn't know at that time that I could take some time off. So it was just a desire on my mind. All I'm saying is that she said, there are some amazing students that I went with. And one of them was the person who at that time was still a brahmachari and later on became a Swami. He was Swami Viditatmananda. He said he is an amazing person if you ever have a chance to meet him. And so I knew a little bit about him. But over the years, I've got to know him pretty well because, as you know, He used to come here and give talks on the Gita. I invited him to come every year, take one chapter of the Gita, and then he would stay with my wife and I in our home for 1 week. And during that time, we had a number of discussions about things. And I'm very grateful for him for introducing me to Swami Maheshanandaji's Hindi translations. And so a number of other I'm very grateful for. But basically what I found him to be is a person without any frills, without any kind of agenda. Very simple, truthful, bare bones, down to earth person. And this introduction that I was telling you to do, to take, to study, is an important reflection of what he thinks about Vedanta. And when he taught us Kaivalya Upanishad, I remember those talks and I said, this is very clear. We must put this down on a book. And then I insisted in doing all of that. So that's all, this is how the book came about. But all I'm saying is that please read the introduction carefully, maybe a couple of times, maybe more, which in some way reflects my introduction in a different way through this example of a lost son and so on and so forth. So please do that. I think you should all have by, I think, with a couple of exceptions. One person in Germany who has not given me the address, and I will send it to her, and another person based in San Francisco who has not given me the address. I think the book has now gone out to everybody, and I think you've all received it. So you should have a copy of that by now. So, my suggestion is that you read the relevant text after the class. But the introduction is throughout, so you can just go through it anytime. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. So, relevance to us in our life, the word Visharanam, that aspect of the word Sat. So here's how it is. When we take birth in this world, then the entire experience of living is very solid and firm in my mind. And it is partially happy and partially unhappy. And if you examine the nature of everyone's life, it is generally not very happy. Most of the time, I am tinged with unhappiness. Let's be honest with ourselves. And we have some ways of mitigating that unhappiness by some means to keep it away from us. And as you know, the most important one is eating. And Bhagavan, Ishvara, has given us that facility. That really for a while after eating, you feel satiated. You feel, I'm okay, I'm all right. So the sense of unhappiness gets away from you, but not for long. That all is not well with you is, as I was mentioning, is a kind of a shruti in the background. And there are ways of mitigating it. One of them is to drink some alcohol, or to take some hallucinating drugs, or I don't know what other people do. But it is only temporary. It doesn't really go away. So my sense of reality about the world is unmistakable, unshakable. And the reality of the world is that I am a transient, born here on such and such day, and even if I am growing, my problems are still there and they are accelerating. I'm not able to really be a continuously happy person, and I can mitigate it to a certain degree, but there is an inevitability of my life, and besides, you cannot cross death. This is the end of my life. So this feeling about the reality of the world as it encompasses my life, that I am really one of the very limited, small entity in this vast world, is a foregone conclusion. It is not something which I can remove. Not remove. And another aspect of that is that if I have the experience of freedom from problems from time to time, I don't have the knowledge of how it happens. I have some minor knowledge, like for example eating. If you're hungry and if you're starving, then you can eat something and then the hunger pains go away. But here's what I'm saying, is all part of this whole teaching, is that I have the experience of freedom. I do have to have the experience of freedom, but I have no knowledge of it. So knowledge and experience are two separate things. So this fact is very clearly pointed out in this book by Swami Dayanandji called The Introduction to Vedanta. So this was transcribed by one of our students, and it's become a very important book. If you ever have a chance to, Swamiji used to, I remember Swami Dayanandji, I recall this so well. I was sitting in a satsang with him early in the morning in Anaikatti, the ashram in Anaikatti, much later on. This is in the last 20 years or so. And I was sitting there with him in the morning before breakfast, after a class. And so he was reading a newspaper and I was just conversing with him. And so one of his assistants, staff people came up and said, Swamiji, there's a person who says, I would like to get some important books that you have written. Which one should I give him? And Swamiji mentioned to her, yeah, you know, the two important books. So she says, I just want to be sure. He says, yes, the Introduction to Vedanta and Value of Values. Those, give them to them. So I made a mental note of that he himself prefers that out of all. And at that time he had not finished writing all the books. Now, of course, we have many more. But these two were his favorites. And so he said that to her. And to this day, I have not forgotten it, that those were his own favorites. So in that book, Introduction to Vedanta, Swamiji takes up this concept of knowledge and experience very well. And he gives the example there of a sunrise. So sunrise is an experience. But the knowledge of the experience is false. It appears that the earth is stable and the sun is a transient. And the knowledge is just the opposite. The true knowledge is just the opposite. That the sun, relatively speaking, is the stable and the world is rotating. Now, when you understand that, the experience remains the same, but the interpretation of that experience is entirely different. I remember some time ago, because I'm very fortunate that in the morning, where my kitchen nook is, we are a little higher up from the ground, and I can see the sunrise from the mountains every morning. Whenever there is, these days, of course, there is so much fire and there is so much smoke from the fire. This morning, for example, I could not see the sun when that also is like a moon. Only about 20 minutes, half hour later on, that I could see up on the. But anyway, that's normally when it is clear, you can see. It just happened 3-4 days ago, when you could see the sunrise. And I used to, used to see sunrise clearly, but I used to be able to visualize with some focus. And I swear I could even feel a little bit of that the sun is not moving, but the whole earth is moving. It is the truth, but it happens so slowly that it doesn't become apparent. Anyway, I'm going into too much detail. It was a very pleasant experience. I was able to just concentrate on that. I just visualized, and I could almost like see that the earth is rotating. Anyway, going back to it is the experience and knowledge are two different things. You can have an experience without knowledge. You can have an experience with false knowledge, or you can have an experience with true knowledge. The example of every night when we have a deep sleep is the example of experience without any knowledge. And the example of both the dream experience and the waking experience is, it is an experience with false knowledge. So, it is, the hints are there, but I have no knowledge about the hint. The hint means that my feeling that my basic reality is that like that of a caged person in this world, at the mercy of the world, and a transient whose life is going to end one of these days. This is my firm, not only that, firm understanding. Not only that, I look at the world as something very real. It affects me. What people say affects me. What my mind tells me affects me. And I cannot get out of it. I can mitigate it to a small degree, but not much. The overall reality of that is very firm in my mind. But when some hints are given that this is not true as an experience, I don't have the knowledge of that. Because, believe it or not, for a long period of time during every night, this experience of the fact that I am just a small individual is gone. It is no longer there. So, in fact, if the reality of the world was true, it would never go. Because what is the definition of reality? Satyam. Satyam means one which is always Satyam. Does not mean come and go. It is always Satyam. So at night time, I don't have the reality of the world as being Satyam. But you know what? I ignore it. And why do I ignore it? Because the experience is that I am free is without any knowledge. I misinterpret it. And how do I misinterpret it? I get up in the morning and said, oh, I had a nice sleep. So the waking experience is the real one, and just the sleep itself was just an interruption. That's just like a minor mitigation. Not so. Not so. Because you know, and you and I both know, that no matter how serious your situation in life it just goes. If it was real, it would never go. And it goes without any trace for 6 to 8 hours. And so what that means is that even when I don't have the experience, first of all, my experience is that I'm very limited. I'm like a caged animal. You know, it's kind of like you're like like a bird that has a string attached to the feet, and you can fly up to a certain point, but you cannot just fly away. You're still kept within a certain radius. So that's the experience of each human being, and reasonably so. And there is no avoiding that. This is a very firm thing. So it is exactly like saying, I know and I believe and I've accepted that our son has been killed, and all I can do is to get some portions of his clothing. So, and also I hope that we can do the proper, we can get his body and we can do some cremation or burial, as the case may be. That's all I can hope for. So similarly, the word Upanishad means Visharanam, that this whole experience of life where I am at the mercy of the world is a firm conviction with the knowledge of Upanishad, there is a crack in it. It's just like a person coming in and saying, your son is not dead. And at this point, I'm not ready to just subscribe to that view completely. It'll take a while. But there is a crack in it. There is a possibility. This is the first aspect of the word sad of the Upanishad. It has the ability, if we have the right set of conditions. So the person who was sitting next to the sun and who was coming to New Delhi anyway and personally delivered this news, that has to happen. Because if somebody writes a letter, you don't know whether it's somebody who's just extracting some money out of something or whatever. But this was a very believable person. He had no reason to just come in. He was just going to just give me the candy and the flowers and walk away. He has no agenda for it. It's very believable. And the way he said it, convincingly. So similarly here, the words of the Upanishads have to be delivered by a trustworthy person. If you look upon me and saying, I'm not sure about this guy. Yeah, I've had lots of people talk to me and he's one of those and so on. Nothing has happened so far and nothing is going to happen. Then we have not connected. If I cannot convince you about myself, how can I convince you about the message that I'm giving you? I remember Swami Viditatmananda saying in one of our walks he says, when I look at some of the people that I have really helped, what I find is that their trust in the Shastra, the spiritual knowledge, is through their trust in me as a person. And it is important that gets developed. It's a lot harder in these online classes because I don't see you in person. But I'm also very encouraged by a number of emails that I get. I just got an email yesterday from a student who said, I never miss a class. I attend all 3 of your classes. I never miss it. You may not see me, but I just want you to know how important these classes are for me. I just got this last night, and I get this from time to time. So I am very happy that possibility of this trustworthy bond is there, because that's important. Because otherwise you can just go through these Upanishads and say, okay, I've done this, now what's next, and so on. Where did you study it from? Oh, I looked at some books and so on. Nothing happens. So anyway, the first meaning of the word sad, which is the very core of the word Upanishad, is Visharanam. And Visharanam means that all of a sudden you should see that this reality of the world that I'm facing may not be that real. There is a chance that I can cross it. This was never presented before. It was always a restatement of your own experience with some modifications. That if you really believe in certain things, then you can go to heaven and you can do this, all those kinds of things. But the reality of the world was never questioned. Here comes along an Upanishad and he says, no, just like the reality of the sunrise has to be questioned. There's no sun rising. It is the earth moving. So you have to have the knowledge of the experience. The experience doesn't change. Here Swami Visharanam had given this very beautiful example, and I think I'll use it again in that sense. So, he had given this example about the life of a Jivan Mukta, of a person who has really, and so this is the Avasadhanam, the last part of this word Sad is Avasadhanam, means it just completely eliminates any sense of limitations whatsoever. So I'll come to that in a bit more detail, but since I have that example, I might as well give it to you now. Visharanam says that for a Jivan Mukta, so one who's totally free while living, you don't have to be free while you're after death, you have to be free while you're living. So Jivan Eva Mukta, Jivan means one who is living, it's a present participle. So while living is a present participle, not having lived. While living, present participle. So this is what the word Jivan means. And you are free. So the example given is that of defanging a snake. Beautiful example. So if you go to India and you got these snake charmers who make a living out of making a cobra dance through his, he has this music, and the cobra has no ears whatsoever. And so what he is looking for is the physical motion of this drum that he has, which is the reality. And so he makes the cobra lie down. And it happens to all of children. When our children, we took them to India, they all fascinated. So finally the person opens up the basket and he starts doing all this, and then the cobra looks up and puts his head up like this and makes some dancing moves, so on and so forth. And he can even hold it very close by. Cobra is one of the most dangerous things. It is very difficult to survive the bite of a cobra. But this fellow is able to handle them. In fact, he sleeps, in the same room with him and so on. You know how? He defangs it. So they have figured out a way to, I don't know how they do it. They maybe put some, some kind of anesthetic and anesthetize it and take out the poison from the fangs. After that, it doesn't matter. Then it is the same looking snake. It does exactly the same thing. It tends to bite you and all that. Even the snake doesn't know that it's lost its fangs. It might try to bite you because of its natural instincts and so on. It doesn't matter. Beautiful example. So, Swami Maheshananji says that for a Jivan Mukta, what you find is that the experience of the world remains the same. There are people talking, and then people saying some funny things about you, perhaps criticizing you. Your own mind also has some funny ideas from the past, all that. Everything is just going on as usual. But there is a huge difference. You defanged it through knowledge. Now you smile and you say, oh my God, this really looks like it's real. It isn't. You defanged it. You do not allow it to affect your own reality. You look upon it as it's just like, in a play. If you are in a play, that is the other, there are so many different ways of expressing this point. That in a play, if you are, for example, inebriated, you took a bit too much to drink, and your reality is blurred. You are acting in a play where you don't have a very good part. People are abusing you and even beating you up and so on. And if you've lost sight of the reality about yourself, you might not like it. So why are people being mad at me? Your mind even might say, this is just a play, and then you say, I don't care. I don't want people to be really even abusing me at all, because your reality is all mixed up. But if the signs of your drinking were to mitigate, and so the hangover goes while you are still acting, you suddenly realize, oh my God, this is not who I am. I'm something which is much more secure, happy, real. Then you don't mind acting. The same experience of acting now is no longer affects you. So in some ways, this whole process starts with a crack, which is Visharanam. Then the second aspect of that is the Gati. So the Gati means the process of getting there. And again, I think we can go back to our contrived example of a person coming in and giving this very unlikely news, happy news. And so even though in the very beginning he gives you some facts and it gives you a crack in your firm belief that your son has been killed, but now he has to prove it, because it is just a crack. And you might think of this person as a crackpot, making fun of it and so on. And you can even see some of the people around you, and he says, I've seen people who take advantage of bad news and they extract a lot of money for you. I hope he's not one of those. So you are also cognizant of that. But now the fellow has to convince you. And he does it with a variety of different ways. He says, listen, I know all. In fact, it's very possible that he might actually have a valuable piece from your son. Some watch or ring or something. And he says, if you think that I'm bluffing you, this is what he gave you. Even there you may have some doubt, because you can say, maybe the watch was extracted from a dead sun. So yes, there is a process where the person is trying to convince you, but you are not fully convinced yet. Same thing happens in the study of Vedanta. Yes, there is a very definite crack that happens, and you become suddenly aware of the possibility of your not becoming mortal, you being immortal. There is a crack, no doubt about it. But it's a long way from getting convinced about it fully. And even as Vedanta gives you a number of logical reasons to back up this unlikely assertion, you have doubts. You have doubts. And those doubts come in and says, I've been studying Vedanta for so long, nothing is happening yet, I don't know if this is truth or not. Maybe I should just go to some other way. Maybe Buddhism seems like it's giving you some immediate relief, some meditation and so on. I don't know about the study, whether it makes any sense or all those kinds of things will come up in your mind. Try it. Try it. And hopefully you will see that. And so hopefully you'll see that this is all going to work out. So here, this is where the preparation for understanding becomes very important. Sadhana. Because the nature of knowledge, the very intrinsic nature of knowledge is eligibility for the knowledge. Like for example, in this case of the sunrise and so on, you cannot explain this to a 1-year-old. Just going back to the analogy of youngsters, it's very, very real, because we now have a third granddaughter who just turned 5 months old a couple of days ago. And we interact with her. She's coming here tomorrow from San Francisco, so we'll spend a good day with her and so on. But I can tell what she's capable of knowing and what she's not capable of knowing. She doesn't recognize us yet. And we are trying very hard and say, "Hi, I am Dadima, I'm Papa," and she looks around and says, "I don't understand what you're saying." So there is no capability. She's not eligible to understand. It will come. It will come. So you cannot show the reality of the sunrise being false to a 1-year-old. But perhaps when it is 2, maybe 3, I don't know, some time later, it can finally hit. So you cannot say that there is no truth in it. So similarly, that is the study of the gati. I'm talking about gati. So to get to the end of the journey, what needs to happen is to improve your eligibility. The truth remains the same. It doesn't say that, it is one thing for this person, another thing for that person. It's the same truth. So the sadhana is very important. And this is what we will talk about in the Kaivalya Upanishad. In the very first one itself, we'll spend so much time on this. So we will look into that. The eligibility of understanding this wonderful truth. But the message first has to be given. You won't even start until A trustworthy person is able to tell you that this is possible. Otherwise, you say, the whole world doesn't believe in it. How can I disbelieve this person or this knowledge? So it's a miracle, really, that we get together and we at least entertain the possibility of this happening. So that entertaining one is what is called Visharanam. Visharanam means that it loosens. If something looks like very solid, but it looks like there is something there. I remember this example given by Swami Dayanandji a long time ago. He says, supposing you are in an archaeological survey of some kind, archaeological event, archaeological survey, which typically happens. So what typically happens is that over a period of time, so much dust, etc., gets collected that old cities get covered. And if there is lack of water around, there's no rivers and so on, and slowly, this all happens very slowly over thousands, hundreds of years. Then the whole city becomes covered. And then it just looks like there is just ground. There is nothing, there was no city before that. But archaeology consists of investigation. And maybe I think there used to be a Roman civilization right here. So let us dig up to see if there was, we can find some vessels and so on and so forth. So this is the archaeological survey, archaeological event. So typically there will be a professor and a number of students, and they have some methodology of striking the ground and extracting things and so on. And all of a sudden, when this happens, one of the students strikes what appears to be a metal. There can be metal pieces and so on and so forth. So so the very sound of it is metallic, not the ground. So he rushes back to the teacher, to the leader of the excavation, and says, please come, I think I found something, I want to show it to you. So they all gather up, and indeed they can put some hammer on this and it's a different sound. And yet it is all covered with mud, caked in mud, not just easily removable. So what they have to now do is to keep digging and find the contours of this apparent vessel, metallic vessel, huge metallic vessel which has been caked in. And finally they are able to see the contours, and through some methods of striking and so on, they see it's cracking. It is no longer a solid piece of earth. It can actually be extracted as a single piece. Not the same example, but just similar to that. So that is where now what they have to do is they have to keep digging, see the totality of this vessel, clean it up, and several days, months later, this becomes an archaeological wonder to be put into museum, shiny gold. And at that time it was indistinguishable from the earth. So very similar to that is what the gati is, where the process of, there is a crack there, but you have to now clean it up and to excavate it, so to speak. And then at the end, there is Avasadhanam. So Avasadhanam means that so that's where the Jivan Mukta is, where you have defanged it, even though through your karmas that have to fructify, you've already taken a body. And the prarabdha, what is called prarabdha karma, is going to take its while. You cannot just suddenly disappear, poof. Our acharyas say that if that happens, as soon as the person becomes realized, what's so-called realized, he becomes poof, he's gone. Who is going to teach? You only have some foolish people who have not completely understood their teaching. But anyone that has any kind of a vision and so on becomes poof. And in fact, the teacher itself will not want to do it. Because you still have family and friends and so on, and you suddenly disappear. It's not how it happens. What happens is that the knowledge of the sunrise becomes apparent. You have the same experience, but the experience is no longer tinged with any doubts. That the sun doesn't move is very firm, even though the experience is there, but you have defanged it. It doesn't hold you back. And then when the prarabdha karma ends, your understanding of who you are doesn't change. Whether you have a body or not, it doesn't matter. You are the very Atma itself. So that is the Avasadhanam. So Avasadhanam here means you have complete cessation of any duality. So in one case it is apparent duality, which is Jivan Mukti. So these are all technical words, we will use it some other one, which is what is called Badhita Anuvritti. Badhita Anuvritti is exactly the example of a defanging one, is a very good one. It's no longer dangerous, it's a fun. Otherwise, if you know that there are snakes around behind these, you think that supposing I see a snake slithering around in this room, you think I'll be able to teach? No way. I'll be so scared. But if I have a pet snake, I remember my younger son, Manoj, when he was going to college at UC Davis, one of his friends said, I can drive you there, and they had not started the college yet. But he says, on one condition, I have a pet snake and you have to hold it in your lap for 2 hours to go to Davis. I don't know, I would not have agreed to it. So his person said, no, it's just a pet snake, don't worry about it. I just don't want him to be going around in the car. So just to keep this in your lap, and then you can come with me. I don't think he ever told us beforehand. I would have said, I don't know if you should go, but he went. And he said it was funny, after a while I got used to it. So if there is a defanged snake, of course it was defanged, then you can tolerate it. It's not a big deal. So the Avasadhanam also happens in 2 stages. One is as a Jivan Mukti, the other one as a Videha Mukti, without any body. So the Upanishad has the ability to first give a crack, Visharanam, then the process of removing the doubts, Gati, then Avasadhanam. Complete cessation of duality. This is what an Upanishad does. Not a simple thing. So, with that, a general introduction to Upanishads is now over. And what I'd like to do is to go to the prayer, the Atharva Veda prayer, Bhadram Karnebhihi Shrunuyama Devaha. So we'll spend probably not a full class, a partial class on that. And then we will straight away get into the particular Upanishad which we have resolved to study, which is Kaivalya, in the next class. So with that, I end this class with a prayer and see if you have any questions. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So nice to see you all. Again, quite a few people who attended both the classes, which always amazes me. How can you be listening for 3 hours? That is just very impressive to me, honestly. And so my all good wishes to you and the other people who were just on this class. So welcome to all of you. Very happy to spend this time discussing all such a important aspect of our lives, and if some of you can be helped with it, it gives me great joy, honestly. So wonderful. So if you have any questions, then do write to me, that if we cannot do this in this forum, and I would be happy to reply to you. I think one of you had sent a request for, I think it was Natalia, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. I have to look at my notes for the meaning of certain verses, prayer verses in the end. And so I will go over that to see which prayers you wanted, and I'll make sure that we spend some time doing so. I'll wait for another couple of minutes to see if some other comments or questions have come up. There don't appear to be any. So with that, I take your leave, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Om.